Good evening. My name is Debbie Hill. Welcome to Family Night at Hill Alcohol and Drug Treatment Center. Tonight's lecture is a continuation of our family series. The last few Tuesday nights we've been discussing issues that are common in families that are struggling with a family member who is struggling with addiction. And the last couple of weeks haven't been too much fun, I'm sure, because we've been discussing pretty extensively the family problems. And tonight we're going to switch gears, and I'm sure you're going to be glad to hear this. We're going to switch gears, and we're going to switch away from the problem and step into the solution. And what we're going to be focusing on tonight is the change process and how to build healthy families. And so the first thing I want to talk a little bit about is actually about this thing we call change. And what I want to start out with is to hopefully invite you to, or to challenge you actually into looking at your old attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors, and challenge you to work on this change process. And the thing that you need to know is that human beings, and particularly alcoholics and addicts, really resist change. Change is something that we don't welcome. Change is something that's hard and it's difficult. And so if you're sick and tired of being sick and tired and you don't want to do what you've been doing anymore and you are really ready for that change process, here is how it goes. The first thing that you need to know about change is that change happens, I really believe this, is that change happens when the pain of where you are is greater than your fear of moving forward. Change happens when the fear of where you are is greater than your fear of moving forward. And to illustrate that, I want to talk about cows. I want to talk about cattle because Rocky used to be a cowboy, and he was telling me about how they work cattle on real-life ranches. And so as he was telling me this, it clicked in that this is really the process of change. So if you are working cattle, typically what you might have is pasture A and pasture B. And in pasture A, you've got all these cows. And the problem with pasture A is that the pond is all dried up, and the grass is all brown, and there's not enough good stuff over here to keep these cattle healthy. These cattle are not doing well any longer. It's not working for them anymore in pasture A. Now over here in pasture B, we've got a prettier sight because in pasture B we have a really nice pond with fresh water, and we've got lots of green grass, and life is good over here in pasture B. So what the cowboys need to do, and they know they need to do, is they have to get these cattle willing to move from pasture A over into pasture B. This requires a change. Well, guess what? These cows aren't up for this kind of change. These cows are going to be resistant to change because they're comfortable. Although pasture A isn't taking care of them anymore and they're not doing well in pasture A, they're comfortable in pasture A. So the task is going to be to convince these cows to go through the scary process of change. They don't want to go through this gate. This is a scary process for them, but they have to go into pasture B. So this is what has to happen if you were a cowboy and you were looking at this. What would have to happen is you'd have to move these cows all over here and try to get these cows to go through that little narrow scary opening. And if you were a cowboy, you'd know that the way you had to do that, or a cowgirl, you'd know you'd have to surround these cows and apply a lot of pressure to these cows, and you'd have to make these cows believe that it's a worst case scenario to stay here than to move over here. The pain of staying here has to be greater than their fear of moving forward. So you'd surround these cows with big old horses and screaming and yelling cowboys and maybe some motorcycles and maybe a couple of cattle prods, which would apply a lot of pressure. And eventually what would happen is these cows would start moving forward and they'd go through that gate and they would have executed that change process. And in a nutshell, I believe that pretty much says a whole lot about change. Now, a lot of people believe that the intent to change is enough. That the intent to change equals change. Guess what? This is a false statement. Intent to change does not necessarily equate to change. However, if you have a sincere desire to change and you couple that intent to change with a commitment to a plan of action, your likelihood of actually executing change becomes much greater. The other thing that I'd like to point out about this process of change is that people that are truly invested in doing things differently and truly invested in change must be willing to go through a period of time that they feel uncomfortable. You know, anybody that's decided that they're going to get in physical shape and begin an exercise program, you know, it's not fun when you start to exercise. Well, it might be fun for the first couple of times, but you know, it's hard and your muscles hurt as you go through that change process. And the same thing is true with psychological change. Now, the last couple of weeks, we talked about the rules and the roles in the family, in the dysfunctional family system. And we said that the rules and the roles were symptomatic of a dysfunctional or unhealthy family. It was something that unconsciously those rules would emerge in a dysfunctional family. And so if we're going to have our goal be that we're going to move towards being a healthy or a functional family, then what needs to happen is that we need to reverse those roles. We need to reverse those rules. So if the rules in the dysfunctional family were don't talk, don't feel, don't trust, then our new rules in our healthy family must be, in this family, we do talk, we do feel, and we do trust. So we're going to reverse our roles and our rules. And the rules now in our family are we do talk, we do feel, and in this family, we do trust. So let's break those down. Let's take those one at a time and let's break those down. And the first one let's talk about is that we do talk. And again, when we talk about talking in families, we're not talking about sharing our opinions and our ideas and our thoughts. That's pretty much on a superficial level. And really what we're talking about is a sharing of our deeper selves, a sharing of our feelings, a sharing of what's real to us on an emotional level. And a lot of times people are uncomfortable with this simply because, you know, it's foreign. We don't know how to do it. And one of the things that I would encourage you to look at is that there's a high probability in the addictive phase of family life during active addiction is that family members get pretty good at sharing their opinions about what people are doing wrong and what it is that they need to change. And I would encourage you now at this point in time to try a little assignment, to do a little homework, to try an experiment, to stretch a little bit further, And what I would encourage you to do is to consciously, and conscious is a real good word here, because change is not going to happen just kind of naturally. There has to be a conscious effort, a conscious commitment to that change process. So use that conscious effort and make a commitment that you are going to, on a daily basis, find something that you appreciate about the person that you've been struggling with, and to express to them directly in words what it is that you appreciate about them that day. It sounds easy and it sounds simple, but you know what? You're going to find that most likely to be a challenge. To find one thing, at least one thing on a daily basis, that you do appreciate about that person you've been struggling with, and to take the opportunity to accept the challenge that you will express to them on a daily basis what that thing is that you appreciate about them. Okay, that would be one thing to do. You know, I want to tell you a little story about that. In my family growing up, I've talked some in the past videos about my relationship with my alcoholic father. And I want to take that one step further, because in my family, there was just a sense that you knew you were loved. And I think everybody in the family knew that the other person knew on some level that they were loved. We weren't real demonstrative. We weren't really good about talking about our feelings and what we appreciated about each other. Okay, and that was just the way it was. It was just accepted. We didn't know any different. And as a child growing up, you know, I really doubted whether or not my father liked me. I always knew that he loved me, but I didn't really know that he liked me or approved of me or appreciated me, because it wasn't something that he shared with me. One day, and this was after I was grown up, I was in college, one day I had an occasion to go to my dad's work, and I needed to pick something up from the secretary, and I'd never been to his work before. And I went to his work, and I went up to the reception window, and I said, I'm Billy's daughter, and I'm here for blah, blah. And the lady just went absolutely wild. She just went absolutely wild. Oh, you're Debbie, you're Billy's daughter. Oh, I'm so happy to meet you. Irma, come on up here and meet Debbie, meet Billy's daughter. And she came up, she said, oh, your dad told us all about you. He told us that you're in nursing school at Loma Linda. He told us that you got an A on your final last week. He told us you're gonna do blah, blah, blah. My father had told these women that he worked with, I didn't know my dad knew all that about me, you know? I didn't know that my father liked me. I didn't know that he approved of me. And I was absolutely blown away when I went to his work and his secretary shared with me that my father, you know, he'd been bragging on me, and I didn't know that. So take the time, make the effort, and make sure that your loved ones know what it is that you appreciate. And stretch that envelope. Switch from focusing on the negative and switch to a commitment to focus on the positive. Okay. Let's go on to our next one. So we do talk. Let's go to do feel. If you grew up in a dysfunctional family, chances are you learned as a young child how to stuff feelings, how not to feel feelings, how to numb your feelings. And now if the commitment is that we want to go from a state of being less functional to a state of being more functional as a family or healthier as a family, then our commitment must be to, in this family, we do feel. And let's break that down to what that actually would look like. Because what I'm talking about here is that our new commitment to ourselves and to our family is that we are going to build and maintain in this family an emotionally healthy climate. In this family, we're going to maintain an emotionally healthy climate. And what am I talking about? What does that actually mean? What that means is that the new attitude in this family is that all of your feelings are welcome here, and I want to know what they are. All of your feelings are welcome here, and I want to know what they are. So to kind of demonstrate what this shift would be like, let's look at the possibility that in a dysfunctional family, for instance, a common symptom of the don't talk rule in the dysfunctional family would be a message that you might give a child that would say, if you're going to cry, go to your room. If you're going to be a baby, go to your room. If you're going to whine. By the way, you know what whining is? You know what whining is? Whining is actually anger coming through a narrow opening. That's what they say whining is. I heard that, I thought that was great. That makes sense to me. Whining, anger coming through a narrow opening. So in our new family, in our healthy family, we want to present the message that all of your feelings are welcome here, even the difficult feelings, even the difficult feelings. And how would I build that emotional healthy climate? The first thing that I would have to do is take responsibility for my own feelings. You know, if I'm one of those people that have been using substances, or if I'm one of those people that came from a dysfunctional family, that we didn't express feelings, that we didn't have emotionally healthy climates, the first thing I'd have to do is address my own issues with my difficulties with operating on a feeling level. And I'd have to learn to get comfortable with my own feelings, with experiencing my own feelings, and then also with my ability to express my own feelings. I'd have to take responsibility for that. And so how would I go about possibly learning how to do feelings? Where would I learn how to do feelings? Suggestion would be to go to a place on a regular basis that feelings are okay, that feelings are expressed. See people modeling feelings. And a place that you might go to do that would be an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, or a Narcotics Anonymous meeting, or an Al-Anon meeting. For some people, you know, church is a safe place. People can do feelings in church, in therapy, in your groups. You know, that's why you're here. Finding a safe friend. One time, a friend of ours, and we didn't do this on purpose, it was just one of those things and it turned out that way. A really dear friend of ours, his name is Danny, he got stuck with going to lunch with about 5 of us girls. So it was Danny and 5 girlfriends. And we went to lunch, and, you know, we pretty much operated like Danny wasn't there. And, you know, so what was lunch about? Lunch was all about talking about our feelings, you know, because these are women, and these are women that are real okay sharing feelings. And so we're just talking about, oh, God, I was so angry, and oh, I was this, and oh, I was sad, and I was devastated, and I was all these things. Danny sat there just watching us, and he was kind of scratched his head, and he said, is this how women talk? Is this what you guys do? You know, so it was a good experience for him in getting comfortable or experiencing what it's like to just be open and honest and share feelings. So you might have to experience that. You might have to go someplace where you're seeing feelings being modeled and learning how to be comfortable with your own feelings. Now let me say here that there is a difference. What we're not talking about is condoning the inappropriate expression of feelings. We're not doing that. What we're doing is we are teaching that it is appropriate to have powerful feelings. It is appropriate as human beings to have powerful feelings. We're not condoning inappropriate expression of feelings. We're just validating that powerful feelings are appropriate and people have them. I'll tell you another story about feelings. And, you know, I want to do kind of a little disclaimer on this, because as a parent, God knows that I have not done everything right and perfect as a mother. You know, my head is full of information. I've got all kinds of good information here, but I'm also human, and I have lots of difficulties with doing things appropriate and perfect in the way of parenting all the time. But there was a time when my daughter was young. She was about maybe 4 years old, and there was a moment there that I was brilliant as a parent. And it was a moment when She was cranky. You know what, she may have been younger. I'm thinking that maybe she was more along the lines of 3. And she was having a cranky evening. You know, she just wasn't a happy camper, and she was whiny, and she was crying, and I don't remember what the event was going on, but I know she was just being a pistol. And I was standing in my kitchen, and, you know, I was getting annoyed, and, you know, I didn't want to hear her, and I was tempted to say those words, you know, if you're going to be like this, you're going to have to go to your room and chill out, because I don't want to hear this. And in that brilliant moment, I had this internal intuitive wisdom that said, do something different. Do something different. And so I looked at this whiny, discontent, unhappy child who was expressing herself, and I said to her, look, honey, you know what I think we need to do here? I stepped over to my stove, and I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the timer here. And what I want you to do is I want you to stamp your feet, and I want you to cry as loud as you can, and I want you to get all of your anger and all of that crankiness the best you can. Get loud, scream, yell, cry, stamp your feet, shout, do whatever you need to do, but until the dinger goes off on the timer, get it all out. So I set the timer, and she let it rip. I mean, she was just fully into those feelings that probably only a 3 or 4-year-old can have, and just expressed herself fully. And the dinger went off, and I said, are you done? And she said, no. So we set it again, and she went again. The dinger went off, and I said, are you done now? And she said, yeah. And you know what? It was over with. And in that simple way, and I'm probably not suggesting that you do that on a daily basis, but it demonstrates the power in simply validating that people have negative feelings. You know, letting her express her feelings did no harm. It did no harm to anyone. It wasn't hurtful to her. It wasn't hurtful to me. It was just validating that for whatever reason on that particular day, she had a lot of powerful feelings that she needed to get expressed, and she did that. You know, so validating feelings, modeling for your children, expression of your own feelings in appropriate fashion is really, really powerful. Really good stuff. So we do talk, we do feel, and the last thing I'm going to talk about is that we do trust. That we do trust. And trust is an interesting thing when we talk about substance abuse, because when people come in for substance abuse treatment, the first thing we do is an assessment. And in the assessment, we're trying to determine what their motivators are, how motivated they are for sobriety, you know, what's brought them to treatment, where the pain is in their life. You know, and it's interesting because we look at a person's compartment in their life. We look at, you know, what kind of things are happening in the workplace, what kinds of things are happening legally for them, what kind of negative consequences are they having health-wise, financially, you know, and not everybody has problems in those areas. Not everybody has a problem legally. Not everybody is having a problem with their health. Not everybody is suffering problems in the workplace. But almost always, people are having difficulty in relationships. Almost always, that's across the board. People report that they're having problems in relationships. And I think universally, what people want when they come into treatment, what they want to get out of sobriety is they want to get their loved one's trust back. And what the family members really want is to be able to trust again. People are very, very aware that the trust has been a difficult issue, and they're really anxious and desirous that the trust issue be reestablished. Lack of trust is learned. I will learn not to trust an individual. Lack of trust is learned. And the restoration of trust, trust coming back, is something that must be earned. It's something that must be earned. And there's not an absolute formula. You know, people want to know, well, when will I know that they're trustworthy? When will I know that I can give them their car back if it's an adolescent? When will I know that they're not going to do this to me again, or they're not going to relapse? How will I know this? And you know, there isn't an answer for that. There is no magic formula that after this length of time, clean and sober, that a person is absolutely trustworthy. And I encourage people to trust their intuition, to work their own recovery programs, work on themselves, and then trust their intuition about trust. There is one formula, though, that I'll pass on to you, and I think that to get trust back, there is a formula for that. And the formula for that is this, is right behavior. Right behavior over the right amount of time will restore trust. Right behavior over right amount of time will restore trust. And what that is for one person may not be the same for the next person. I encourage alcoholics and addicts to understand that in early recovery, one of the things that an alcoholic or an addict needs in early recovery is they need a high level of accountability. They need to be held accountable. People that are held accountable usually do better in the recovery process than people that don't have any accountability. And so one of the things that I would encourage for the alcoholic or the drug addict in early recovery is to understand that the family members, their significant others, need to be able to acknowledge, they need to be able to see this right behavior. And so is it okay for somebody to follow up? Is it okay for somebody to check up? What about the issue of maybe doing continuous drug screens? Is that helpful? Is it appropriate? My answer to that, my opinion on that, is absolutely. It's very appropriate. Somebody that is in recovery, truly in recovery, if a significant other is going to feel better, if we're going to have a drug screen process in early recovery, the person that's actually in recovery and actually doing well will welcome that process. They will welcome those drug screens. They'll welcome the opportunity to say, I want to show you I'm doing all right. I want you to see I'm doing all right. I'm going to share with you again a personal story. And this was an event when that same daughter, my only daughter, was about 16 years old. And up until this time, to my knowledge, this child had never lied to me and her father. She, if you would have asked me, would she have the ability to out and out lie? At that period of time, I would have said, absolutely not. She doesn't possess the ability to lie to us directly. Now, I'm aware she may have omitted information. She may not have told us everything, but to out and out lie, I would have said, I don't think she could do it. Well, guess what happened? What happened was that we caught her in an absolute outright lie. Caught her in it, and it was a pretty good one. It was a pretty big one. Up until that time, we had never been the type of parents that micromanaged or, checked up on her. If she told us she was going to be somewhere, we assumed that's where she was going to be, and we had no reason, no cause to parent any differently. However, after we caught her in this lie and found out she does have the ability to look us in the eye and lie, I gave her a promise, and her father gave her a promise. And our promise to our child was, we will be checking up on you. You need to be aware of the fact that we will be following up. We will be checking. If you tell us you're going to be someplace, we're going to check up and make sure that that's where you are. We will be following up. So, shortly thereafter, when she got her car back, she got off of restriction, and the punishment phase of the whole deal was over with, or the consequence, we'll use that word, phase of the deal was over with, and she got her truck back. she had a curfew, and her curfew at that particular time was midnight. And so she was supposed to be home at midnight. Well, at about 12:10, 12:15, the phone rang, and she wasn't home. And the story she said is, well, I'm not there because I'm stuck in traffic on the 15th. And I thought, you know. Now, her father didn't wake up. He's a little hard of hearing. He didn't hear the phone, so he didn't wake up. And I'm laying in bed, and I'm thinking, I don't think that there, you know, because this is midnight. I don't think that there's traffic bumper to bumper on the 15 at midnight. That just didn't sound right to me. And as I laid there, I remember that I had made her the promise. I had made a commitment of, I will be watching you, you know, like in Meet the Parents, you know, I'll be watching you. I had made that commitment. I will be watching. And I thought, you know, when I confront her with this story is not true, I need to know exactly what I'm talking about. When I confronted her, I wanted to make sure that I had my data right, that I knew where she was and that there was no traffic on the 15th. And the only way for me to know that for sure was to get out of my nice warm bed and to put my Uggs on and to get in my car in my jammies and drive up the 15 so I could look at what the traffic situation actually was. So with Rocky still sleeping in his bed, I left, and that's where I went. And I got almost to Marietta, which is about 10 miles up the freeway, and guess what I saw? On the south side of the freeway, they were doing nighttime construction, and they were down to one lane, and guess what? It was absolutely, positively bumper-to-bumper traffic coming home, coming that way. And so the daughter was absolutely right. Well, guess who got stuck in her jammies and in her Uggs on the freeway coming back home? And it took me about, I don't know, probably 45 minutes to get back home. When I came back home, I walked in my kitchen. Well, see, Rocky didn't know where I was, and my daughter didn't know where I was. So, you know, I was the missing mom in the middle of the night, so I came walking in my jammies and my Uggs to my family sitting at the kitchen table going, where have you been? So I had some explaining to do. The explaining I did, though, to that daughter was that it was worth the trip. It was worth getting up because I had the opportunity to catch her in the truth, which was absolutely, totally invaluable to me, was catching her in the truth. And so catching people in the truth is really important, and the only way you're going to do that is to keep that commitment of following up, and for the alcoholic and the drug addict to understand that this is an essential process, not only for them, but for the people that they're trying to get the trust back, trying to restore that trust process. The other thing I wanted to say about trust is that our old definition of trust was about you. The old definition of trust was, I trust you, or I don't trust you. But it was other-oriented. It was out there. It was my trust of someone else. The new definition of trust can be expanded. So the new definition of trust is about trusting myself. It's about getting my eggs out of that other person's basket. You know, is that my happiness and my peace of mind is not solely contingent on that other person doing the right thing. It's the understanding that I have no control over what other people might choose to do with their lives. I have no control whether that loved one is going to choose to live in recovery or if they're going to relapse and go back out and live the old drug lifestyle. And so my new definition of trust isn't about trusting them. My new definition of trust is about trusting myself. Is the trust that I have in myself that if that person stumbles, if that person falls, if that person lies, if that person chooses to totally mess up their lives, that as sad as that would be, as disappointing as that would be, as much as that might anger me that that's their choice. My trust now is that I personally have the resources that I need to walk through that in a way that allows me dignity and allows me to respect myself. So my new definition of trust isn't so much about them as it is trust of myself, that I have everything that I need to work through the emotions that might come with disappointment and anger and hurt and all of that kind of stuff. Okay, so one last thing that I will talk about, and this goes back to the nature of change. And this is another thing that I have discovered about the change process as it relates to people going from being in addicted families and dysfunctional families to people that are now entering a drug-free, sober lifestyle and building healthy families. Now, I'm not an artist, so you're going to have to forgive this a little bit. This is a pendulum. It's not a golf club, it's a pendulum. And this is addressing the significant others to the alcoholic or the drug addict. And this is representing pre-recovery, before we get into a recovery process. And before the codependent gets into the recovery process, the focus in the codependent's life is largely on the other person. It's all about you. It's about your wants, it's about your needs, it's about your feelings, it's about how to make you happy, it's about how to change you, it's about how to fix you. Whole lot of energy and a whole lot of focus for the codependent is wrapped around this other person. The me in this is secondary and it's very small. This is the state of pathological codependence. Now what happens is that we enter into a recovery phase. The family, the addict, the alcoholic move into recovery, and in recovery, this pendulum is going to swing. And it's the nature of change that we don't just move a little bit, that we seem to go to the opposite pole, that we seem to go to the opposite extreme initially in the change process. And so this pendulum's going to swing over here, and over here, it's no longer about you in capital letters. It's now all about me in capital letters, and you become secondary, and you become small. And so this person over here that had a hard time setting boundaries and had a hard time saying the word no and had a hard time identifying their personal wants and needs and feelings, now, because they're in recovery, now they're not having a hard time with that. In fact, the me part of the equation has gotten pretty big. And so, it's all about me. And it's all about, this is something that I have to do for myself. And, I won't do that for you. And no, that's not healthy for me. And it's all about me. And I'm going to my meeting tonight, and you can make your own dinner. And, it's all about me and my wants and what I need. And a lot of people get really puzzled by this, especially the alcoholic or the drug addict, because it went from being all about me over here to now it's all about you over here, and we don't understand that. We don't get that, and we don't really like that a whole lot. Some people mistake this for recovery. This is not recovery. This is an essential piece in the early recovery process, but this is not truly recovery. This is not recovery any more than this was recovery. But I ask that you have tolerance and patience with this phase of recovery, because this will only last a certain amount of time. This will not go on forever. If everybody stays concurrently in the recovery and treatment process, what will happen over a period of time is that the pendulum will balance out. and it will come to a middle place where it's no longer about you, it's no longer about me. What it is about us in our relationships. This is the place that codependents strive for. This is the place that says, I can truly be interdependent in a relationship. I can be in a relationship with you without losing a sense of myself. This is the place in our relationships where we learn things like compromise, where we learn things like negotiating. And so with that, I invite you to try on these new attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors. And I wish you courage, and I wish you well, and I thank you for your attention.